Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button and leave a comment. Your support helps me bring you more powerful life stories that truly touch the heart. Thank you for being here. I love Sundays. It's the only day when our family gathers together around the dinner table without the rush and bustle of weekdays. And today, the bright September sunlight fills our 3-bedroom apartment, and soup steams on the table. Anna, my mother, always insists on soup first. "There must be order in the house, Mike," she says. And I don't argue. After 28 years of work as a design engineer, I've come to understand the value of order too well, both in blueprints and in life. Dad, pass the bread. Anthony reaches out his hand without taking his eyes off his plate. My son is a tall, lanky teenager with my facial features, only without the gray in his hair and without glasses. At 16, he reasons like an adult, and this both pleases and worries me. Sophie, my youngest, fidgets in her chair, swinging her legs. Her light curls bounce in rhythm with her movements, and her big eyes, so much like Marina's, constantly search for something new and interesting. And Grandma promised to show old photographs, she reminds us, hastily stuffing the last piece of meatloaf into her mouth. "Don't rush, little grasshopper," I smile. "You'll choke." I glance briefly at the clock and sigh. Marina is late. However, this has become common lately. Either a meeting ran late or traffic jams in the city. Or maybe she forgot about the family dinner altogether. As if hearing my thoughts, the front door slams. "Sorry I'm late." Marina enters the room swiftly, as always impeccably dressed, with a subtle scent of expensive perfume. She kisses the children on the tops of their heads in passing, nods to Mother, and sits across from me. "Terrible traffic downtown." "It's okay, we just started," I say, pushing a bowl of soup toward her, but she shakes her head negatively. I grab something in the city, and immediately takes out her phone, quickly running her fingers across the screen. Mother looks at her with poorly concealed disapproval but remains silent. Anna, a hereditary literature teacher, has always been a keeper of traditions, but she won't criticize her daughter-in-law, at least not in front of the children. "Well then, young ones," Mother changes the subject, ready for a journey into the past. She takes an old photo album in a worn leather cover out of her bag. For Sophie, this is a magic book. She adores looking at yellowed photographs and listening to Grandma's stories. Anthony pretends he's not interested, but I see how he steals glances at the photos. "Look here, this is your grandfather Andrew." Mother tenderly touches the photograph where a young officer in dress uniform looks into the camera with that special seriousness of people from the wartime generation. "And these are his medals." Sophie reaches for another page where combat awards are kept under transparent sleeves. "Yes, sweetheart. Medal for Berlin." Anna turns the page. "And these triangles are field letters." Back then at the front there were no envelopes. Soldiers folded the sheet in a special way. Like origami, Sophie clarifies matter-of-factly. "Something like that," I smile. I catch myself looking not at the album, but at my wife again. Marina sits with an absent look, mechanically nodding to the rhythm of the conversation. But I actually know this look. She's somewhere far away. The phone in her hands vibrates. She starts and, throwing an "excuse me," leaves the room. Anthony follows her with his eyes, then looks at me questioningly. "Dad, is everything okay with Mom?" He asks quietly when Mother captivates Sophie with a story about a military hospital. "Of course," I answer too quickly. "Just work. You know yourself, she's now a lead consultant." Anthony doesn't believe me. I see it in his eyes, the same as mine. But he doesn't insist, just frowns and looks away. "Smart boy, too smart and observant." "Come on, I'll show you something," I say, getting up from the table. In the corner of the living room stands a chest of drawers, massive, made of dark oak, with carved patterns and brass handles. "This belonged to Grandfather," I explain, running my hand over the polished surface. "It's over 80 years old. I restored it for half a year." "I remember," Sophie exclaims. "You spent every weekend in the garage working on something." "I wasn't sawing, I was sanding and fitting parts." I carefully pull out the top drawer, demonstrating to the children the perfectly smooth glide. There's a special mechanism there, they don't make them like that anymore. Because then they made things to last forever. Not for sale, Anthony remarks thoughtfully. And with surprise I recognize my own words in his. Said once upon a time. Unexpectedly I remember how Marina and I bought our first furniture. Then, 20 years ago, we spent a long time choosing each item, checking for durability, consulting each other. And now, when was the last time she asked my opinion? Marina appears in the doorway, as always, with her phone. Mike, we need to talk, she says in a business tone. In private. In the kitchen she stands by the window, arms crossed over her chest. The light emphasizes the fine lines around her eyes, which she so carefully masks with makeup. In this lighting she suddenly seems unfamiliar to me, like a stranger. I need to go on a business trip, she says without preamble. To New York for 10 days. Urgent system optimization at headquarters. 10 days. I don't hide my surprise. That's a lot. What about Sophie? She has her dance recital next week. I can't refuse. Her voice becomes harder. This is a very important project. My annual bonus depends on it. Bae. I'll take time off work, I begin, but she interrupts. No need. The kids are grown up, they'll manage. Your mother will help. Something in her tone makes me wary. Maybe we could come with you. I suggest. I'll take vacation time, we'll show the kids the capital. We've been planning it for a while. For a split second something like fear flickers in her eyes. Don't be ridiculous, she cuts me off. This is a business trip. I'll be busy from morning to night. 10 days to set up accounting. That's quite a lot. Don't you think? The stubbornness of an engineer accustomed to precise calculations awakens in me. You're now an expert in management accounting. Her voice rings with irritation. There's integration with new modules, staff training. By the way, don't ask how much time it takes to design your next gear. A floorboard creaks in the hallway. I turn around and notice Anthony's figure quickly disappearing. He heard everything. Fine, I give up. When's the flight? Wednesday 11:40 flight. Well. Marina buries herself in her phone again. All the documents are ready. In the evening, when the children have gone to bed and mother has gone to the guest room, I go into the bedroom where Marina is packing. I silently watch as she carefully folds blouses and trousers into her travel bag. In the side pocket something glitters with lace. I lean down and pull out a delicate blue lingerie set with the tags still on. What's this? I ask quietly. Marina starts and quickly snatches the lingerie from my hands. Just bought something new. Her voice sounds too carefree. For a business image it's important to feel confident. Blue lace lingerie with tags still on for confidence. I smirk, but there's no joy in my heart. Strange business dress code you have. Don't talk nonsense. She snaps the suitcase shut. It's just comfortable underwear. And anyway, I'm tired and want to sleep. Tomorrow's an important meeting. I stand for another minute, looking at her tense back, then leave. Something cold and heavy spreads in my chest. But I push away suspicion. 22 years together, 2 children, so much experience together. No, such a thing simply cannot be. I go to check on the children. Sophie sleeps curled up in a ball, clutching a stuffed bear to her chest. On the nightstand in a small jewelry box lies Grandma's ring. A thin gold ring with a tiny ruby. Mother gave it to her granddaughter today after lunch. Your grandfather always said, "The main thing in a family is honesty and loyalty, Annie," she said, putting the ring on amazed Sophie's finger. And I've lived with that my whole life. Honesty and loyalty, I repeat in a whisper, closing the nursery door. Words that became the foundation of my life suddenly seem so fragile. From the bedroom comes Marina's muffled voice. She's talking to someone on the phone, laughing quietly and somehow differently than usual. Or maybe it just seems that way to me. I stand for a long time by the window in the dark living room, looking at the lights of the night city. After 28 years of work at the plant, I learned to notice the slightest defects in structures. Tiny cracks, invisible to the untrained eye, but capable of eventually destroying an entire mechanism. And now, peering into the darkness outside the window, I understand with engineering clarity that cracks have appeared in the foundation of our family. The only question is whether I can fix them. I never thought that at 52 I would take vacation to spend time with my children. Peterson, my department head, raised his eyebrows in surprise when I put the application on his desk. For 10 days, Mike. He looked at me over his glasses. Something wrong. My wife went on a business trip, I answered, trying to make my voice sound routine. Need to be with the kids. Ah, he said with understanding. Well, of course, family comes first. The second day without Marina turned out unexpectedly warm. Sophie and I sat in the park. She was swinging her legs on the bench and licking ice cream. Dad, when will Mom call? She asked for the 10th time, looking at me with her big eyes. Soon, sunshine. I smiled, hiding my anxiety. Mom has a lot of work, but she'll definitely call. I didn't tell my daughter that I had already tried to call Marina 3 times today. Each time the voicemail. Subscriber temporarily unavailable. With some sixth sense I understood it wasn't about signal or a dead battery. In the evening Anthony and I prepared dinner. My son silently cut vegetables for salad. His movements were precise, confident. At 16 he knew how to do many things around the house. How are things at school? I asked, stirring the soup. Fine, he shrugged. The biology teacher is nitpicking, but I made up all my missing assignments. We were silent. Anthony methodically chopped cucumbers, but I felt he wanted to say something. Finally he put down the knife. Dad, is everything okay between you and Mom? Question I feared. I turned to my son and saw in his eyes that he already knew the answer. Just wanted to hear the truth. It's complicated now. I decided not to deceive. Adults sometimes have difficult periods. You're getting divorced. His voice sounded duller than usual. No, of course not. I put my hand on his shoulder. Mom and I have been together for 22 years. It's just a difficult period right now. Work, fatigue, the same thing every day. She talks to someone on the phone at night, Anthony said, looking me straight in the eyes. I've heard it several times. Something inside me snapped, but I forced myself to smile. Probably work issues. You know, Mom has clients all over the world, different time zones. Anthony shook his head but didn't argue. We silently finished preparing dinner, and only when I was setting the table did he quietly say, "Don't worry about Sophie, Dad. I'll look after her if anything happens." A lump formed in my throat from these words. My son, my boy, was preparing to protect his younger sister. From what? From the destruction of the family, which he seemed to sense more acutely than I did. On the 3rd day I decided to act. I called the Metropolitan Hotel where Marina was staying. "Good afternoon," I said, trying to speak calmly. "I'd like to speak with the guest in room 718, Marina Andrews." "One moment, connecting you." The receptionist was friendly. Then came long beeps. And again the subscriber doesn't answer. "Would you like to leave a message?" "Tell me, are you sure Mrs. Andrews is currently at the hotel?" I asked, feeling how it was getting cold inside. "Yes, the system shows that the keycard was used half an hour ago," the girl answered. "But perhaps your wife is in a meeting or doesn't hear the phone." Wife? I hadn't said that Marina was my wife. However, we have the same last names, she could have guessed. Later I called Sergio, Marina's colleague, with whom we sometimes met with families. I said I wanted to clarify the details of the business trip to send my wife some forgotten documents. So she went alone. He was surprised. Usually they send a group for such projects. And 10 days is too much for setup. Usually 3 to 4 maximum. I pretended that everything was planned that way, thanked him and hung up. An icy emptiness was growing in my chest, but I still didn't want to believe the obvious. In the evening we were watching a comedy with the children when Sophie suddenly jumped up and brought her drawing album. "Look, I drew our family," she proudly announced, showing the drawing. With bright markers she had depicted the 4 of us. Me with glasses and Anthony next to me, looking like 2 peas in a pod, Sophie with curls, and Marina standing a little apart with a phone in her hand. There was a noticeable distance between us. Very beautiful sunshine. I hugged my daughter, trying to hide how this detail struck me. "You're a real artist." And let's go visit Mom, Sophie suddenly blurted out, looking at me with shining eyes. We'll surprise her. Froze. The thought was simultaneously frightening and right. To look my wife in the eyes, to understand what was happening. Great idea, I said slowly. What do you say, Anthony? My son looked at me intently, as if trying to read my thoughts, then nodded. I think it's a good idea. Mom will be pleased. I caught a strange intonation in his voice, but decided not to think about it. Sophie jumped with joy, and I suddenly realized this was my chance to fix everything, to get the family back on the right track. The next day, after sending the children to school, I sat down to plan. I booked plane tickets, a room at the same hotel. Strange, but acting so decisively, I felt a surge of strength. For the first time in long months, I wasn't going with the flow, but taking action. In the evening, when Sophie was already asleep, Anthony and I took out the wedding album. I hadn't opened it for 10 years and now with surprise examined the young couple in the photographs. Myself without gray hair and wrinkles, and Marina with long hair in a lace dress. She was very beautiful, Anthony noted. She's still beautiful, I objected. Just different. Time changes everyone. How did you meet? My son asked, flipping through pages. At a mutual friend's birthday party. I smiled, remembering. I was 28, had just gotten my first promotion at the plant, and Mom was 25. She worked as an accountant at a construction company. She came with a friend in a blue dress. I noticed her right away. I spent the whole evening working up the courage to approach her. And you did? Anthony smirked. Not exactly. She started talking to me first. I laughed, remembering my embarrassment then. She asked if it was true that I was an engineer. It turned out her father also worked at the plant in the foundry. We immediately found common topics. Memories flooded back with unexpected force. Our first date in the park, the trip to the lake where I proposed, the housewarming in this very apartment that we bought with a mortgage. Anthony's birth, then Sophie's. Our quarrels and reconciliations, hard times and holidays. 22 years. It's not just a number. It's part of life, shared memories, children, habits, jokes understandable only to the two of us. Could all this really be crossed out? No, I didn't believe it. There had to be a way to fix everything. Do you love Mom? Anthony suddenly asked, looking at the album. Of course, I answered without hesitation. Mom and I have been through a lot. There are difficult periods, but she's pulling away, my son finished for me. See it. I had nothing to object. The 16-year-old teenager saw what I had been trying so hard not to notice. Marina was moving away from us. Not physically yet, but emotionally she was already somewhere far away. Everything will be fine, I promised, closing the album. You'll see. Right before takeoff, already at the airport, I made one last attempt to call my wife. Voicemail again. After the beep I said, Marina, it's me. We have a surprise for you. See you soon. I didn't reveal the details, wanting to see the expression on her face when we appeared at the hotel room door. Surprise, joy, maybe tears of happiness. I pushed away the unwelcome thought. Dad, come on. Boarding has started. Sophie tugged at my sleeve. I took my daughter's hand, nodded to Anthony, and we headed to the gate. Inside, two feelings battled. A premonition of trouble and hope for the best. Chose hope. We're flying to Mom, Sophie joyfully exclaimed. Yes, sunshine, I smiled. We're flying to Mom. The distance between us has been growing too long. It was time to shorten it. The plane gently touched the runway at the airport. Sophie, pressed against the window, enthusiastically clapped her hands. Dad, we've arrived. Now to Mom. I nodded, smiling at my daughter, but glanced at Anthony. He sat absorbed in his thoughts, with headphones around his neck. He had turned off the music but never took them off. My son was silent the entire flight, responding monosyllabically when I tried to start a conversation. He understood too much. Anthony, I touched his shoulder. Everything okay? Yeah, fine. He forced a smile. Just tired. An inner voice suggested he was preparing for the worst. As was I myself, though I didn't admit it. At the airport, Sophie couldn't sit still while we waited for luggage. She jumped around me making plans. Mom and I will go to the zoo and to Times Square and buy ice cream at the food court. Definitely, sunshine. I stroked her head. Only let's first get settled at the hotel and rest from the trip. I don't want to rest. He pouted. I want to see Mom. Anthony stood silently nearby, watching his sister with slight sadness. At 16 he was almost a man, tall, serious, with a look that read concern for his sister. A taxi delivered us to the Metropolitan, an old building in the city center. Sophie, tilting her head back, examined the architecture on the facade. Wow, like in a fairy tale. Mom lives in a castle. The luxurious foyer with marble columns, velvet armchairs, and crystal chandeliers was impressive. The company pays well for business trips, I thought, remembering our modest seaside vacation 2 years ago. Good afternoon, I addressed the receptionist, a pretty girl with an impeccable smile. We have a reservation under Andrews. While she checked the information, I asked, tell me, is my wife Marina Andrews currently at the hotel? We want to visit her, surprise her. The girl beamed. Oh, how sweet. Yes, Mrs. Andrews is at the hotel. Room 718. She checked the computer and frowned slightly. Only the system shows the room is registered for 2 people. Something cold stirred in my chest. Probably a project colleague, I said, trying to make my voice sound natural. The company saves on business expenses. Probably, the girl smiled, clearly not wanting to go deeper. Your room is 824 on the 8th floor. Here are the keys. Can we go up to Mom first? Sophie asked, tugging at my sleeve. Of course, I patted my daughter's head. Only let's leave our things in the room first. No, straight to Mom, she insisted. I want to surprise her. I looked at Anthony. He shrugged, but his eyes read. Let's get this over with. Fine, I gave in. First to Mom, then we'll sort out the things. The elevator silently lifted us to the 7th floor. The hallway was carpeted with soft rugs that muffled footsteps. The lighting was dim, intimate. Sophie almost ran ahead, looking for room numbers on doors. Here it is, Sophie exclaimed, stopping at the door with number 718. Mom's room. I raised my hand to knock but froze for a second. What would I say if my suspicions were confirmed? How would I explain to the children? Dad, what are you waiting for? Sophie said impatiently. I knocked. 3 short knocks. Silence fell inside. Then some movement could be heard. Then whispering, but the words were indistinguishable. Mom, it's us. Sophie couldn't stand it. Open up. Silence again, then the sound of footsteps, the click of a lock. The door opened slightly, and Marina's face appeared in the crack with eyes wide with amazement, with disheveled hair. What are you doing here? Her voice trembled. Surprise! Sophie cried joyfully, pushing open the door and throwing herself around her mother's neck. Marina mechanically hugged her daughter, but her gaze was fixed on me, frightened, guilty. She was wearing a hotel robe, her hair was damp, as if she had just gotten out of the shower. Why didn't you warn me? Marina tried to smile, but the smile came out nervous, unnatural. We wanted to surprise you, Mom. Sophie didn't notice her mother's strange behavior. Dad bought plane tickets and booked a room. We'll walk around the city together. Marina, continuing to hug her daughter, looked alternately at me and Anthony. My son stood with his arms crossed. His face was impenetrable. Come in, she finally said, taking a step back. Only I have a bit of a mess here. The room was spacious, with a double bed, soft armchairs, and a large window overlooking the city center. On the nightstand stood 2 glasses with unfinished wine. A man's shirt lay on the floor. At that moment a man about 40 came out of the bathroom, tall, fit, with wet hair. A towel was wrapped around his hips. Seeing us, he froze in place. Hello, he squeezed out, clearly trying to comprehend the situation. Sophie looked at the stranger with bewilderment, Anthony with cold fury, and I looked at my wife, and at that moment something finally collapsed inside me. This is Timothy. Marina tried to speak calmly. Project colleague. We were working on a presentation. In towels? Anthony asked quietly, and his voice sounded more adult than I had ever heard. No, Marina stumbled. We were getting ready for the pool. The hotel has a pool. And what's this? Sophie pointed to the glasses. Kids. Marina pulled herself together. Why don't you wait for me in the lobby? Dad and I need to talk. Mom, who is this man? Sophie still didn't understand what was happening. Why is he in a towel? Your mom and I work together. Timothy intervened, trying to smile. I'm the regional manager. We just had a free day today. Decided to visit the pool. But why is Mom in a robe and not a swimsuit then? Sophie persisted. Sophie, enough questions, Marina said sharply. Anthony, look after your sister downstairs in the cafe. Dad and I will come down soon. Anthony silently took his sister's hand. Come on, Sophie, he said hollowly. I'll buy you ice cream. But we just got here, the girl protested. Come on, Anthony repeated in a tone that brooked no objection, and pulled toward the door. When the children left, heavy silence fell in the room. Timothy, mumbling something about clothes, disappeared into the bathroom. Let's step out, I said to Marina, nodding toward the door. In the hallway she leaned against the wall, avoiding my eyes. Mike, can I explain? She began. Explain what exactly? I felt a strange calm, as if observing what was happening from the side. How long has this been going on? It was an accident. Her voice trembled. We worked late, had a little wine. Doesn't mean anything, really. The receptionist said the room is registered for 2 people. I looked at her directly. That's also an accident. Marina lowered her eyes. I didn't want you to find out. Not like this. Not in front of the children. So how did you want it? My voice sounded unusually cold. In a letter, over the phone? Or were you planning to continue your double life indefinitely? Everything is complicated, Mike. She raised her eyes. Tears glistened in them. You and I have been drifting apart for a long time. You live your work, your mechanisms. Don't shift the blame, I cut her off. If there were problems, they should have been solved, not seeking comfort on the side. I tried to talk to you, she exclaimed. But you always brushed me off. Work, children, household problems. I looked at this woman, beautiful, well-groomed, successful, and didn't recognize the girl in the blue dress who 22 years ago laughed at my awkward compliments. As you say. I straightened up. I'm taking the children and going back to our room. Tomorrow we're flying home. Mike, wait. She tried to take my hand. Let's talk calmly. Maybe not everything is lost. Everything was lost the moment you decided you could easily step over our family. I stepped away. 22 years of marriage, Marina. 2 children. And all this for a couple of nights with a person who in a month won't even remember your name. I turned and walked to the elevator, feeling something breaking inside with each step. Not love. That had been dying gradually for long months. Faith was breaking, faith that everything could be fixed, that our family could still be happy. Going down in the elevator, I thought about the children waiting below. What would I tell them? How would I explain their mother's betrayal? How would I help them get through the pain if I didn't know how to cope with my own? But one thing I knew for certain. Our journey to New York was destined to become a journey to truth. Bitter, destructive truth that would forever change our lives. In the hotel room it was quiet. Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, hugging her knees. Her eyes were red from tears. Anthony stood by the window, looking at the evening city. A motionless silhouette against the backdrop of city lights. I sat in an armchair, searching for words that seemed not to exist in nature. How do you explain to children that their mother, a person who should be an example of faithfulness and love, betrayed our family? How do you tell an 11-year-old girl why Mom was in a room with a strange man? How do you preserve her faith in people, in honesty, in love? Dad, Sophie broke the silence. Why was Mom with that man? Were they really getting ready for the pool? My throat tightened. I approached, sat next to my daughter and took her hand. No, sunshine, not for the pool, I began carefully. You see, sometimes adults get confused in their feelings, do things that can hurt others. Does she love that man? Sophie's voice held bewilderment. I don't think it's love. I chose my words, trying to speak honestly but not traumatize the child. But Mom has some special relationship with this person now. What about us? Tears glittered in her eyes again. Doesn't she love us anymore? She loves you, of course she loves you. I hugged my daughter. She will always love you and Anthony. Sometimes adults just make mistakes. Big mistakes. Anthony turned sharply from the window. Stop making excuses for her, Dad. This isn't a mistake, it's betrayal. She did everything consciously. His voice rang with suppressed rage. And at that moment I saw before me not a teenager, but a young man with firm principles. You're right, son, I said quietly. But Sophie is still little. I'm not little, Sophie protested. I understand everything. Mom lied to us. At that moment there was a knock at the door. We all froze. I went up and opened it. Marina stood on the threshold. Can I come in? She asked uncertainly. Without waiting for an answer, Sophie rushed to her mother. Mom, why did you lie to us? Why were you with that man? Marina looked at me helplessly, then knelt before her daughter. Sophie, everything is very complicated. Adults sometimes get confused. Dad said the same thing, Sophie nodded seriously. But I don't understand how you can get so confused that you deceive your own family. From the mouth of a child these words sounded like a verdict. Marina paled. Maybe we'll have dinner together, she suggested, trying to change the subject. I'll order room service. Good idea, I unexpectedly agreed. The children should at least eat, and then you and I will talk. Food arrived in half an hour. Pasta for Sophie, steak for Anthony, something light for Marina and me. We sat at a small table like an ordinary family on vacation. Only the atmosphere was heavy as lead. Where is Mr. Timothy now? Sophie suddenly asked, twirling spaghetti on her fork. Marina choked on water. He's in his room. But the receptionist said you lived together, Sophie simply noted. In one room. No, what are you saying? Marina smiled nervously. We just work together. Sometimes in my room, sometimes in his. It's more convenient with documents. Then why were you both in towels? Sophie persisted. And why was there wine on the table? Do you drink wine when you work? Sophie, enough, I intervened. Eat your dinner. Anthony silently picked at his steak without raising his eyes. Throughout dinner he didn't say a word, demonstratively ignoring his mother. When we finished eating, I sent the children to get ready for bed. They spread a sofa bed for Sophie and a cot brought by a porter for Anthony. Contrary to expectations, they didn't protest, as if sensing the need to leave Marina and me alone. When the children finally lay down, we went out into the hallway. Neither of us wanted to start the conversation. Listen, Mike, Marina finally said. I understand how this looks, but everything isn't so simple. How not so simple? I interrupted. And how long has this been going on? She lowered her eyes. For months. For months. While I was designing a new unit for the plant, while I was helping Anthony choose a university, while I was teaching Sophie to ride a bicycle, my wife was living a double life. How did it start? I asked, surprised at my own calm. The corporate party in April, remember? I invited you but you refused. Urgent project. There was reproach in her voice. Timothy was there, attentive, charming. He listened to me, Mike. Really listened. Not nodding absent-mindedly while thinking about his blueprints. And that was enough to cross out 22 years of marriage. I felt a wave of bitterness rising inside. You don't understand, Marina shook her head. The last few years I've felt like a ghost in my own house. You're all about work, the children are growing up and need me less and less. And you decided you needed someone who would look at you with admiring eyes and pay compliments. I couldn't restrain myself. And for that you were ready to destroy our family. I wasn't going to destroy the family, she exclaimed. It's just an infatuation. I always planned to return. Return. I laughed bitterly. You thought you could step out, have some fun, and then come back and everything would be like before? Marina was silent. In her eyes was the realization that she had gone too far, and there was no way back. You know, I'm guilty too, I unexpectedly admitted. The last few years I really immersed myself in work, in my projects. I restored grandfather's chest of drawers but forgot to maintain our relationship. I remembered how long it had been since we went to the movies, had dinner alone by candlelight, talked about something besides household problems and children. But that doesn't justify betrayal, Marina, I firmly added. If there were problems, we should have talked, argued, demanded attention, not run to bed with the first person who paid a compliment. He's not the first to pay compliments, she said quietly. But the first who made me feel like a desired woman, not just a mother and housewife. Her words hurt more than the fact of betrayal itself. Had I really grown so distant that I didn't notice how she was withering next to me? Perhaps I missed a lot, I admitted. But trust is a fragile thing, Marina. It can't be glued back together when it's broken. We stood silently for a long time. Two strangers in an empty hotel corridor. What now? She finally asked. Tomorrow we're flying home, I answered. And then I think we'll need to file for divorce. Returning to the room, I found that Sophie was already asleep, curled up in a ball and clutching the stuffed bear we bought at the airport to her chest. Anthony wasn't on his cot. I found him in the bathroom. He sat on the edge of the tub, his face buried in his palms. "Son," I called quietly. He raised his eyes, red, swollen. My strong, always restrained son was crying. "I heard everything," he said hollowly. "You're getting divorced." "Yes," I didn't lie. "It will be better for everyone." "Not for Sophie," Anthony shook his head. "She'll understand. In time she'll understand." I sat next to him. "And you'll look after her, right?" He nodded, then unexpectedly leaned against my shoulder, as he used to do in childhood when he was scared or upset. We sat like that for a long time, saying nothing. At night I couldn't sleep. I lay looking at the ceiling, listening to the children's steady breathing. Sophie tossed restlessly, sometimes whimpering in her sleep. Anthony lay motionless, but I knew he wasn't sleeping either. 22 years. Half my life. Our first apartment, tiny with leaking pipes but so dear. Anthony's birth. I held him in my arms, tiny, wrinkled, and was afraid to breathe. Sophie with her first steps, first words. Our trips to the sea, forest hikes, family holidays. All these memories were now colored with the pain of betrayal. Could they be erased? Forgotten? Or would they forever remain with me? Both bright nostalgia and the bitterness of loss. What would I tell Mother? Anna, with her life principles, would be crushed. She had always been proud of our family, held us up as an example to the neighbors. And how many more such families, outwardly prosperous but with cracks inside? How many men and women live without noticing how they drift apart, until the distance becomes insurmountable? Toward morning I finally dozed off, but woke up to the sound of the door opening. Marina stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee in her hands. "May I?" she asked quietly, so as not to wake the children. We went out into the hallway. She handed me a cup. I took it mechanically. "Mike, I thought all night," she began. "Maybe we should try to start with a clean slate. For the children's sake." "For the children's sake we need to part with dignity," I replied. "Without scandals and mutual accusations. But we've been together so many years. Can't we forgive one mistake?" "It's not about forgiveness, Marina." I looked into her eyes. "It's about the fact that you made a choice and I made mine. We can't go back to the past, no matter how much we want to." She lowered her head. "What should I tell the children?" "The truth," I answered. "As much as they can understand. That we will always love them, but we can't live together anymore." "Do you hate me?" Her voice trembled. Thought about it. Hatred. No, that's not what I felt. Rather endless fatigue and dull pain, as if part of me had died. "No, I don't hate you," I answered honestly. "I just don't believe anymore." And without faith there's no point in continuing. The world I had built for 22 years collapsed in one day. But standing there in the empty hotel corridor with cooling coffee in my hand, I suddenly understood. This was the end of an old life, but perhaps the beginning of a new one. For me, for the children, and even for Marina. I just needed to find the strength to survive the ruins. The return home was difficult. On the plane, Sophie pressed against me, occasionally sobbing. Anthony silently looked out the window, as if they were strangers in neighboring seats, not brother and sister. Marina flew separately on the next day's flight. We agreed to do it this way so as not to traumatize the children further. Mother met us at the apartment threshold. One look at our faces was enough for her to understand everything. "Come in," she said, hugging her grandchildren. "I made soup and baked pies." The children went to their rooms, and I stayed with Mother in the kitchen. She silently placed a cup of tea in front of me, put her hand on my shoulder. "Tell me, son." And I told her everything as it was, without embellishment or excuses. She listened without interrupting, only the wrinkles around her eyes grew deeper. "I knew something was wrong," she finally said. "Women's intuition." Marina was away too often, worked too late, too much, but I didn't want to interfere. "Not my business." "How should I live now, Mom?" For the first time in many years I felt like a confused boy needing advice. "Live on, Mike," she simply answered. "For the children. They're everything to you now. And you know what? I think I'll move in with you for a while. Help with the household with Sophie." That evening we decided that Mother would temporarily move from her suburban house to live with us. And this decision, as it turned out, became the first step toward a new life. The legal formalities of divorce turned out to be simpler than I expected. Marina and I agreed peacefully without court battles. We filed through the registry office. Simplified procedure since we both agreed. The apartment stayed with the children, more precisely, with me with the children's right to residence. Marina took her personal belongings and rented an apartment downtown. Child support for Sophie, $500 monthly, plus half the education expenses. Everything was decided quickly and civilly, as civilly as the collapse of a 22-year marriage could be. Anthony coped in his own way. Outwardly he seemed calm, but I noticed how his fists clenched when Mother was mentioned. The first 2 weeks he refused to talk to her on the phone, didn't answer messages. But at home he took on many responsibilities, helped with cooking, fixed the leaking faucet, even learned to do laundry, as if wanting to prove we could manage without Marina. "You don't need to take on so much, son," I told him one evening when I found him cleaning at 11 p.m. "Someone has to," he shrugged. "You have enough to worry about." I hugged him, feeling how his shoulders tensed then relaxed. "We'll manage," I said. "But you shouldn't sacrifice your life. Focus on your studies, on your future. That's the best help." After this conversation he thawed a little, even agreed to meet with Mother once without Sophie. What they talked about he didn't tell me, but he returned thoughtful. And that evening, for the first time in a long while, he sat down to program. His long-standing hobby that he had abandoned after our return from New York. Sophie processed it differently. She cried a lot, asked questions I had no answers for. "Why can't Mom live with us?" she asked. "If she made a mistake, why can't we just forgive her?" What do you tell a child? That some mistakes destroy the very foundation of relationships. That trust, once broken, cannot be mended. That sometimes love dies and no effort can bring it back to life. "Sometimes it's better for adults to live separately," I said, stroking her head. "But Mom will always love you, and you can see her whenever you want." Mother's presence turned out to be salvation. Anna didn't just help with household chores. She created the core around which our new family formed. Her Sunday soups, her bedtime stories for Sophie, her wise advice to Anthony. All this helped us not fall apart in the first most difficult weeks. "You know, Mike," Mother said to me when we sat in the kitchen over tea one evening, "trouble either breaks a family or makes it stronger. I look at you with the children and see you're becoming stronger." I realized she was right. Despite the pain and losses, we really were becoming closer. Anthony now spent every evening with his sister, patiently explaining programming basics to her. Sophie listened with her mouth open, though she understood little. The attention from her brother was important to her. On weekends we began going out into the city, to exhibitions, theater, parks. The cultural program compiled by Mother, a former literature teacher, helped distract from sad thoughts. On these days I saw how life gradually returned to the children's eyes, how they began to smile. At work I expected sidelong glances and whispers behind my back, but colleagues turned out to be more tactful than I thought. No one pried with questions, but many offered help. Some with a word of support, some with an invitation to go fishing, some with advice on raising children. Peterson, my boss, particularly surprised me by suggesting I take professional development courses. Perfect time, Mike. You'll get distracted, and career prospects will open up. So I found myself in evening courses on modern design methods. There I met Helen Sokolova, a process engineer from a neighboring department. We worked at the same plant but had hardly crossed paths before. Helen was a widow of about 40, with attentive gray eyes and a calm manner of speaking. Nothing deliberately feminine. Strict suit, minimal makeup, hair gathered in a simple bun. But something about her caught the eye. Maybe her naturalness, maybe the intelligence that shone in every word. After classes we sometimes walked to the subway, discussing lectures, and then unexpectedly found ourselves switching to other topics. I learned that she loved historical novels as I did, that she was passionate about Art Nouveau architecture, a movement that had always interested me, that in her youth she played cello and still kept the instrument though she hadn't touched it in many years. It was just friendship, nothing more. But after classes I returned home with a light heart, as if something forgotten and important was returning to my life. I began taking better care of myself for the first time in long years. I joined a gym, started jogging in the mornings, bought books on divorce psychology and raising children in single-parent families. I stopped stress eating and lost 15 pounds. I even changed my glasses to more modern, youthful ones, to the children's surprise. "You look younger, Dad," Anthony noted once. And I really felt younger, as if I had shed not only excess weight but the burden of failures and doubts. Marina tried to return twice. The first time she came with flowers and cake, talking about how she realized her mistake, that Timothy turned out to be empty, that family was more important than anything. I listened to her calmly but firmly said, no. The second time she came with a proposal to start everything over for the children's sake. I refused again. "Don't you want the children to have a complete family?" she asked reproachfully. "I want them to have a happy family," I replied. "And you and I can no longer create one. Too much has been broken." We established clear boundaries of communication, only on matters concerning the children. No personal topics, no memories, no attempts to return the past. Gradually Marina accepted the new reality. She regularly met with Sophie on weekends, sometimes with Anthony if he agreed, took them to cafes, movies, gave gifts, a little fussily, as if trying to compensate for her absence with material things. One evening, when the children were already asleep and Mother and I were drinking tea in the kitchen, I suddenly said, "You know, Mom, I'm thinking of buying a small country house outside the city where we can spend summers with the children, start a garden." "Excellent idea," she nodded. "It's good for children to be in nature. And working the land will do you good too." I looked out the window at the night city and for the first time in a long while felt peace. Yes, my world had collapsed, but from its wreckage I was building a new one, perhaps more solid and real. The road to a new life was difficult, but I no longer doubted that the children, Mother, would walk it with dignity. Summer came to the city unexpectedly, as if turning a calendar page. 8 months after the divorce flew by like one long day, with morning darkness, heavy clouds, but gradually clearing skies. I remember how even in winter I thought I wouldn't survive this year, that the pain of loss would haunt me forever. But time is an amazing healer. It doesn't erase scars, but teaches us to live with them. Today music sounds in our house. An old vinyl record spins on the turntable, filling the space with deep cello sounds. Mother cooks something in the kitchen, singing quietly. Sophie helps her. Dishes clink, laughter can be heard. and I sit in the study with Anthony, going through university application documents. Dad, look, they updated the scores on the website. My son leans toward the monitor. I pass all specialties, even with margin. His joy is contagious. 98 points in mathematics, 94 in physics, 92 in computer science. The results amaze even the teachers. The technical university he dreamed of will now definitely open its doors to him. I never doubted you, I say, hugging my son tightly. He smiles bashfully but doesn't pull away. These 8 months brought us closer than ever before. Anthony seemed to age several years. Serious look, firm line of lips, confident movements. But for me he's still the boy I once taught to ride a bicycle. Helen called, he suddenly says, watching my reaction. Asked if she could come by tonight to bring astronomy books for Sophie. And what did you answer? I try to speak casually. That of course she can. And that grandma is baking cherry pie. Anthony smirks. Helen. Over recent months she entered our lives imperceptibly but firmly. First as a colleague, then as a friend. Our conversations after work became longer, walks more comfortable. In March I first invited her to dinner. Not at home, to a cafe. We talked until closing about work, books, music. About the past. Her husband died 5 years ago from a heart attack. About children, she never had any. This pain was heard in her voice when she spoke about it. In April I decided to invite her home for Sunday lunch. Mother received her with reserved hospitality. Observed, evaluated, tested. By the end of the evening they were already discussing her signature soup recipe and agreeing to exchange books. Sophie was shy at first, but when she learned Helen had played cello in her youth, she peppered her with questions about music. And Anthony silently observed, but after she left said briefly, "She's good. Doesn't pretend." High praise from my son. But the most significant changes happened at work. At the end of winter the director unexpectedly called me in. "Mike, time for you to head a department," he said without preamble. "Peterson is retiring, and you're the best candidate." I was confused. 28 years in the design bureau and always as a performer. Leadership seemed something distant and foreign. "Will I manage?" Asked directly. "You're already managing," the director chuckled. "The last 3 projects were essentially carried by you. Now it'll just be official. And the salary to match, $4,000 plus quarterly bonus." The figure seemed fantastic. For the first time in long years I could afford not just to survive but truly live. And the first thing I thought of was a country house. A small plot outside the city where children could spend the summer, where I could work with my hands, and mother could grow flowers and berries. We found it in May. An old house in a garden community half an hour's drive from the city. A neglected plot with apple trees, cherry trees, and old lilac by the porch. The house needed repair but was solid, on a good foundation. 6 acres of land. Not much but enough for a start. "Dad, look, an apple tree." Sophie ran around the plot when we came to look at it for the first time. "Can I make my own flower garden here?" "A sensible owner lived here," Anthony said appraisingly, examining the buildings. "See how the rafters are done. Solid work." Mother silently walked around the house, touched the walls, looked in the cellar. "Take it, Mike," she said decisively. "Places like this don't come up often. This place has soul." So we got a country house, and I got a new project to pour energy, knowledge, and love of details into. Every weekend we went there as a whole family, cleaned, repaired, planted. Anthony took on the roof and porch. I handled interior finishing. Mother and Sophie started a vegetable garden and flower beds. By June the house was unrecognizable. Freshly painted walls, new roof, repaired veranda. And in the garden the first plantings turned green. Helen first came with us to the country house in mid-June. She brought rose seedlings, a rare variety she grew herself on her windowsill. Sophie enthusiastically helped her plant them along the path. "They'll bloom next year," Helen explained. "Can you imagine how beautiful it will be?" I watched them from the window. A middle-aged woman in a simple sundress and a girl with curly hair bent over the black earth. Something poignant, almost forgotten, stirred in my chest. Not infatuation, that had come imperceptibly but surely. Something deeper, a feeling that life was again gaining meaning and fullness. An unexpected thing happened on Sophie's birthday at the end of June. Marina came with a gift. A tablet that our daughter had long dreamed of. I opened the door and for a moment was confused. For the first time in a long while she was crossing the threshold of our home. "I won't stay long," she said quietly. "Just to congratulate Sophie." Sophie was delighted by her mother's appearance, showed her drawings, new dresses, told her about school and dance class. Marina listened attentively, with some new softness unfamiliar to her. Then she asked permission to speak with me privately. We went out on the balcony, the same one where once, it seems in another life, we drank morning coffee together. "Thank you for letting me come," she began. "I understand how complicated everything is." "You're Sophie's mother," I simply replied. "It's your right to see your daughter." "I've thought a lot these months." Marina looked somewhere in the distance beyond the horizon of city rooftops. "About what I did, about what I lost. I'd like to say I regret it, but that would be insincere. I don't regret that everything came out in the open. I regret causing pain to you and the children, that I didn't find the courage to say directly. I no longer felt happy in our marriage." I listened silently. Surprisingly, the pain her words should have caused didn't come. Only calm acceptance. Yes, that's how it was. Yes, it ended. And it's good that it ended exactly this way. "We were wrong when we thought we could just drift along," she continued. "I escaped into work, you into your projects. We unlearned how to talk, unlearned how to see each other. The affair wasn't the cause but the consequence. A symptom of a disease we both didn't notice." "You're right." I looked at her without bitterness for the first time in a long while. "We're both guilty of our marriage dying long before that day in the hotel." "I heard you have someone." Marina said this without reproach, rather with curiosity. "Yes," I didn't deny. "Helen. She's a process engineer at the plant." "That's good," Marina said unexpectedly. "Children shouldn't grow up without feminine warmth in the house." Then she asked me to call Anthony. Their conversation was short but seemed important for both. I didn't interfere but saw how my son, saying goodbye, hugged his mother for the first time in these months. Something new appeared between them, not the former closeness, but understanding, acceptance, forgiveness. When she was leaving, I suddenly understood that we too had found the path to new relationships. Not friends but not enemies either. Parents of common children, people who shared 22 years of life. And in these relationships there was no place for resentment or regret. Only calm acceptance of the past and respect for the present. On a July evening we had a picnic at the country house. Spread a blanket in the garden under the old apple tree. Anthony and Sophie grilled shashlik on the barbecue we made together from an old barrel. Mother worked over cold soup. Real soup with fresh kvass and greens from the garden. Helen helped her. Their quiet conversation was interspersed with laughter. When it got dark, we lit a fire in a specially equipped place. We sat around the fire, wrapped in blankets. The nights were still cool. Sophie snuggled against Helen, listening to her stories about stars. An unexpected hobby I didn't know about. "See, that bright one there is Vega," Helen pointed. "And over there, look, the Big Dipper. And if you draw a line from the two end stars?" Sophie listened with her mouth open. Even Anthony, usually skeptical of unscientific explanations, attentively followed Helen's hand pointing at constellations. Mother called me aside to the porch, took a small box from her pocket. "Here, son," she said quietly. "This belonged to your father. Wedding ring. He asked me to give it to you when the time came." I opened the box. A simple gold ring, darkened with time. "But you gave your ring to Sophie." I was surprised. "That's different," Mother shook her head. "This is the church wedding ring. Your father wanted it to go to you. Or to the one you'll love with all your heart." I looked at Helen sitting by the fire with the children. As if sensing my gaze, she turned and smiled warmly, openly, without a shadow of coquetry or pretense. "Grandfather would be proud of you, Mike," Mother suddenly said. "You remained human in the most difficult circumstances, preserved dignity and honor. And most importantly, you didn't become bitter, didn't close yourself off from life." "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "Of course it wasn't easy," she stroked my cheek as in childhood. "Easy roads don't exist, but you chose the right one and are leading the children along it. You're teaching them the main thing, how to get up when life hits you in the stomach." We returned to the fire. Helen was now telling about the constellation Orion, about nebulae and distant galaxies. Sophie listened with bated breath. Anthony quietly talked with Mother about his university plans. He dreamed of his own startup, programs that would change the world. "Dad, imagine, Helen says you can see Saturn's rings through a telescope," Sophie exclaimed. "Can we buy a telescope?" "Not right away, sunshine," I smiled. "They're expensive. But maybe for your next birthday." "Can I help a little too?" Helen asked unexpectedly. "I have friends at the planetarium. They write off old equipment, quite functional, just not the newest." "Will you really help?" Sophie's eyes shone. "Of course," Helen hugged the girl's shoulders. "If Dad doesn't object." I looked at them, my new family gathered around the fire. At Anthony, serious and purposeful, with plans for the future and a sense of responsibility that many adults would envy. At Sophie, whose childish spontaneity and faith in miracles hadn't been shattered by harsh reality. At Mother, wise keeper of family traditions, passing them on to the new generation. At Helen, whose appearance in our lives seemed like a gift of fate, unexpected but so natural. A coal shot from the fire, soared up toward the stars and went out. Sophie, following it with her eyes, said enchanted, "Like a soul flying away." "Maybe that's how it is," Helen nodded. "The ancients believed that stars are the souls of people who once lived on Earth. And now they watch over us." Sophie tilted her head back. "And help us," Mother added. "Point the way when we stray from the path." I remembered that day in the hotel when my world collapsed. How it seemed then that life was over, that ahead was only emptiness and loneliness. How frightening it was to think about the future, about the children, about myself. And now, just 8 months later, I sat at my country house by the fire with people who had become my new family. Ahead was vacation, which we planned to spend right here at the country house, with small trips to the city, to museums, the planetarium, concerts. Ahead was Anthony's university enrollment, Sophie's new school year. She had become interested in biology and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Ahead was life. Not the one I once dreamed of, but perhaps even better. Helen again caught my gaze and smiled. In her eyes the firelight was reflected, warm, alive, real. Like the feeling that was growing between us. Not youthful passion, not blind infatuation, but deep, adult feeling of two people who knew the price of loneliness and the value of true closeness. Something changed at that moment, as if the last fragment of the past fell from my heart, freeing space for the future. I understood a simple truth. Sometimes you need to lose everything to find yourself. Sometimes the destruction of the former world is the only path to new horizons. And sometimes fate takes away what we considered important to free our hands for something truly valuable. The fire was dying down, but no one hurried to go into the house. Helen began quietly humming an old song, something about a starry hour and the road home. Sophie laid her head on her shoulder. Anthony tossed twigs into the fire. Mother sorted through currant berries picked during the day. And I looked at them and thought, here it is, my happiness. Not cloudless but hard one, with scars and losses, but real. And I was grateful to fate for this second chance, for the opportunity to start anew, for the lesson that had to be learned at such a dear price. True values are tested in crisis. Real love is known in trials. And the strongest bridges are built after the most destructive floods. The sky above us was strewn with stars, ancient, eternal, indifferent to human suffering and joy. But in their cold light I suddenly saw a reflection of the truth I had been seeking all these months. Life always continues, even when illusions crumble. Today is exactly 1 year since the day I entered that hotel room and saw my wife with another man. 1 year since the moment when the world I had built for 22 years collapsed in an instant. I sit on the veranda of our country house, watch the sunset dying, and think about the past year, about pain and betrayal, about difficult divorce, about new work, new opportunities, and of course about Helen, who quietly reads a book in the chair next to me. I remember how that evening I lay sleepless in the hotel room and thought life was over, that I would never be happy again, that the children would never recover from the trauma, that the pain would stay with me forever. I was wrong. Life didn't end. It began anew. Different, more complex, with scars and losses, but in some ways more real and deep than before. Anthony entered university as he dreamed. Now he's a freshman, already participating in scientific projects, burning with ideas for his own startup. At 17 he became not just my son but a friend and ally. He forgave his mother, though their relationship will never be the same. But in this adult, conscious love there's perhaps more value than in the former childish attachment. Sophie grew up this year, as if she stretched after a storm. She became more serious, more independent, but didn't lose her childish spontaneity and faith in miracles. She still sees her mother on weekends, sometimes stays overnight with her. Recently she told me, "You know, Dad, I'm not angry at Mom anymore. Just sad that it turned out this way." Such wisdom and acceptance at 12 years old. Mother still lives with us, though I offered her to return to her house. "My place is here with you," she said. And I'm grateful to her for this. Her wisdom, her calm confidence helped us all get through the most difficult months. She became the center of our new family, keeper of traditions that we now create anew. Marina. Strange, but I no longer feel anger or resentment toward her. We meet at the children's birthdays, sometimes call about Sophie. I know she's no longer with Timothy. He quickly lost interest once the novelty wore off. I know she recently started seeing someone new, and I sincerely wish her happiness. The 22 years we spent together can't simply be crossed out of life. They will forever remain part of me, a bright part despite the bitter ending. And then Helen appeared in my life. Not suddenly, not at once, but gradually, day by day, conversation by conversation. A calm, wise woman who had gone through her own trials and hadn't lost the ability to love. She didn't try to replace the children's mother, didn't try to erase my past. She was simply there, reliable, understanding, her own. We're not rushing. Helen still lives in her apartment, though she increasingly stays with us on weekends. The children accepted her in their own way, on their own terms. Anthony values her intelligence and knowledge, often discusses his scientific projects with her. Sophie found in her a friend and mentor. Together they grow flowers, go to concerts, talk about stars and music. The country house became our common project, a place where our new life is being built. Here everyone contributed. From Grandma's strawberry beds to the telescope we installed in the attic for Sophie. Every nail driven into the wall, every planted tree is a symbol of new beginning. At work everything changed too. I'm no longer just a performer but head of department, making decisions, leading a team. My projects receive recognition, ideas come to life. Perhaps I was always capable of more, just didn't believe in myself. It took fate's blow to awaken this confidence in me. Yesterday evening Helen and I sat by the fire, as we often do now. The children had already gone into the house, Mother too. We remained alone under the starry sky. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, looking at the fire. "About how strangely life is arranged," I answered. "A year ago it seemed to me that everything was over. And now, she turned to me. Her eyes reflected the flame of the fire. "And now I think real life is just beginning," I said and took her hand. In my pocket lay Father's wedding ring. Not for a proposal. It's too early. We both understand this. But as a symbol of intention, promise, hope. The phone vibrated, a message from Anthony. He and Sophie had baked a pie, were waiting for us for tea. I smiled, showed the message to Helen. "Shall we go?" she asked, getting up. Let's go, I replied. And we headed toward the house where warm light burned in the windows, where dear people were waiting for us. In the country house bedroom, which I repaired with my own hands, now stands a new bed, wide, comfortable, bought after the divorce. On the walls are photographs of children, landscapes taken during our hikes, Sophie's watercolors. This is new space, created for a new life without heavy memories and ghosts of the past. Falling asleep next to Helen, I think not about what I lost, but about what I gained. About children who grew up strong and wise despite trials. About mother, whose love became support in the most difficult days. About work that now brings not only money but satisfaction. About Helen, whose appearance in my life seems almost miraculous. Timely, right, natural. And you know what? I'm happy. In a new way, differently, but happy. Because I understood the main thing. Happiness is not in preserving what's gone, not in clinging to illusions, not in fear of change. Happiness is in accepting life in all its complexity, in the courage to start anew, in the strength to go forward despite losses and disappointments. Grandfather's chest of drawers, which I once so carefully restored, now stands at the country house. It stores family relics, medals, letters, photographs, and among them grandmother's ring that she gave to Sophie. It awaits its time to once again become a symbol of love and faithfulness. Maybe for my grandchildren who don't exist yet but definitely will be. With this thought I fall asleep peacefully, without the anxieties and nightmares that tormented me in the first months after divorce. A new life didn't just begin. It's in full swing. I'm ready to live it completely, honestly, without fear, without looking back at the past. Because when illusions crumble, the path to real happiness opens. To happiness based not on fantasies and self-deception, but on honesty, courage, and genuine values. And I'm grateful to fate for this lesson, for this chance, for this new road to new horizons, new achievements, new life. Life always continues, even when it seems the world has collapsed. Especially then. Dear friends, what do you think about Michael's decision? Should he have forgiven Marina, or did he make the right choice? Share your opinion in the comments. Thank you for listening to the story until the end. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends and loved ones. It motivates us to keep working on new stories every day. Don't miss the next amazing story that's about to appear on your screen. We're very grateful to have you with us. See you soon.